My name is Isaac Dinner. I'm a professor at the University of North Carolina. Thank you for getting it right, Russ. I know a lot of people see my last name and they think there's a better way to pronounce it. I have to say, you're all going to be very disappointed. It's as simple as it sounds: breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So this is a joint project that I've been working on with Harold van Heerde. He's a professor at Massey University, and Scott Neslin from Dartmouth. And I think this is something we've been talking about quite a bit, because we really wanted to look at the interaction between retailers that have these mobile apps where you can go ahead and make purchases. So as Robin was talking about, kind of the before type of app, the customers that use them, and the type of engagement that exists between those customers and the retail stores. So I think Robin's talk was actually a really nice lead into some of what I'm going to be talking about, specifically in terms of measurement. So we have an example here from Macy's. Macy's has lots and lots of different ways that they can talk to their customers. You can actually go to the store and talk to their sales associate, which seems archaic given our discussion today. You can have text messages sent to your regular phone. They have their app where you can have all sorts of account management. You can actually make an appointment as well. And then if you actually go to their app, you can see that they do a number of different things. And you can buy through the app, and as Robin pointed out, a lot of people search through the apps, but not a lot of people actually buy through them. So what is exactly the point of a lot of these mobile applications? And what you see here is that Macy's is actually doing a little bit of promotion as well. So they say, well, we have this extra 15% off if you use this promotional code. So perhaps some of what these apps are doing is to add a little bit of promotion. Something that also came up as well, there's a good amount of engagement that perhaps comes along with this. And IKEA, which is fortunately something Robin did not mention, does a good job with a lot of these different aspects throughout the purchase decision process. If you go to the store, they give you a nice map. They tell you where things are at the store. And one of the best ones that I like is if you actually need to buy some furniture, you can sit at home, and thanks to if you also actually have their catalog, you can have a visual representation of how those items would fit in your store, fit in your home, specifically to scale, taking into account the size of the catalog. So this is my actual home, and I can see what their classic Pong chair would look like if it were there. And with this, the big question though is, all right, there's all this app access going on. So is it this issue of promotion, or is it really leading to some sort of customer engagement? And how is that engagement actually occurring? So these are the types of questions that we wanted to get some insight into. So among customers who downloaded app, these customers that are a bit more engaged, we wanted to ask a few questions. And the first would be, so what determines accessing the app? So we all have our retail apps. We download a number of them. They sit in our phones. There might be 10 of them. There might be 20 of them. It's a crowded space. What makes us go ahead and actually open them and see that there's some value from that? The second question we wanted to look at is, does this app access actually lead to purchases? So can we develop some sort of link between accessing the phone or accessing the application and actually going to the store to make a purchase, going to the web to make a purchase, or doing it through the app itself? So these are the types of things that are really driving this project. So I think study setting matters quite a bit for a question like this, depending on what stage of the process the app comes in. So this study takes place for an upscale fashion apparel retailer. The app was launched in 2010, highlights products from a particular product category, and so it gives the ability to purchase items within that product category, but not throughout the entire store. There's no price discounts. There's no promotion of any other kind. It's upgraded throughout the period of observation, which is something that matters as well. And we have about 1,300 customers, 70 weeks per customer, so about 90,000 observations. Now, conceptually, we wanted to think about this as the following. All right, we have access the application. And that's going to have an impact on, all right, going to the store, making a purchase, or going to the web and making a purchase there as well. And what we're trying to do is estimate all these aspects relatively simultaneously. So we have all these different covariates, so things that impact both whether you're going to access the app as well as make a purchase at the store. So things like how far you are from the store, what types of advertising that happens, what types of promotions the store has, trend, seasonality, whether you purchased in the past, those types of things. However, there's also a lot of unobserved factors not available to the company as well. So this is our unobserved heterogeneity. However, there is this issue where these two things are going to be correlated. So if I have to buy a gift for my mother around her birthday, I might be more likely to go to the app, but I also might be more likely to go purchase at the store. So that's something we need to take into account. And so for that, we'll use a control function estimation approach. And so we have a number of instruments to kind of tease that out. So that'll be time since download, as well as the amount of upgrades, or the app upgrades, since those are independent as well. So we're trying to identify a model, and this will help with that. So this is the main structure of what we're trying to do. See what impacts access, and see how access impacts store purchase, as well as online purchases. So as the first academic talking today, I might as well get used to some numbers. But I'll try to break it down into the things that matter quite a bit. So we have two variables, purchase, binary on the dependent side. So what makes somebody purchase online, what makes somebody purchase offline. And that's a function of a few other different things. And what we have here is access, online advertising, offline advertising, how far are you from the store, seasonality, trend, past purchases, those types of things. And one of the keys to this, which I really want to highlight on, is this, that we're not actually using whether you access the app, the online advertising, or the offline advertising. What we're doing is we're actually treating them as what we call a stock variable. And I think this is familiar to some of you. For those who isn't, for those for who it is not familiar, we can think about this as, say, a leaky bucket. And every time it rains, the bucket fills up, but at the bottom there's a tiny hole, and over time the water will flow out. That's how we think about advertising, accessing the app, as well as the decay that goes along with it. So that tells us something about the short versus the longer term effects of accessing the app and these different advertising impacts. So we also have our unobserved factors. So this is one equation. The next thing we want to look at is what impacts access. So access is going to be a function of some of the same types of things. So we'll have some of these same variables, online advertising, offline advertising, seasonality, past purchases, but then we also add in a few more things. So when there are upgrades, as well as the download date. So these are types of things that are not included in the main equation, which allows us to identify the model. And we also have our unobserved factors as well. And to be complete, we also have what our variable definitions would be for the access stock equation, which is saying that effectively these decrease in value over time. So you can think about this as you access the app today, it's a little bit less salient, a little bit less salient, a little bit less salient, all the way down to nothing until you access the app again, in which case the bucket gets filled up again and it repeats. So the question from this then becomes, well, how fast does advertising decay, or does it matter at all? As well as, does access have a long-term benefit, and does that matter at all as well? So we have to estimate this. So we use a control function approach with a grid search, which effectively means we want to figure out how fast these values decay. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to find the model with the best fit, given that we have all of these different decay function parameters. So for each one, we pick out one set of what we call the lambdas, so the decay for access, online advertising, and offline advertising. We use that to estimate our first stage model, which means we use that to determine how quickly access, or how much of an impact that has on access. We take the residuals from the first step and we put them in the second step to calculate the purchase model, and then we iterate through to figure out what's the most accurate set of decay parameters. So that's the rough process, and it allows us to create some nice 3D graphs, which really don't actually mean that much because you're going on three different variables. But what it does tell us is something about how fast these decay. And for this particular app, we see the following. We see that the lambda, so how fast the app decays, is actually 0, which means access has pretty much an immediate impact. So if you access the app today, there's not really a long-term impact. Basically, that's just going to matter right now. It shouldn't really matter much 2-3 weeks from now, a month from now. To provide some more validity for this, offline advertising has a little bit longer of a decay. Online advertising for this retailer has a very, very quick decay function. So it goes away very, very quickly, which seems to go in line with a lot of research in the area. Offline advertising, traditional advertising, it's a little bit more about brand building. Online advertising, a little bit more at the point of sale. So that's the first point. Then we can start to look at what impacts accessing the app as a whole. And so there's a few things that we see. Well, first we see, all right, using this app, usage drops quickly. These apps are great. You go to Target, you go to IKEA, you see, oh, they have an app, you download it, you use it once, and then what happens? You forget about it, you never go back. This is a very common thing. So app usage decays very, very quickly. Second thing which comes up is that, well, we said advertising actually increases mobile app usage. So you have this big set of apps in your phone. It's like you're walking through the mall and you have to figure out which one to open up. Well, advertising is relatively effective in the mall. It seems to be effective for opening up an application as well. We see also that purchase drives access to the app. So if you purchased in a previous time period, that has an impact on whether or not you're going to open up the app and access it this week. So a few things matter so far. Advertising matters, purchase matters. And then what we actually see is this app, over our time period, had 5 different upgrades. Some of them you can see were really positive. Some of them were also really negative. I think this is something many of you have also experienced. You open up your mobile phone. They say, all right, these set of apps want to upgrade. Some of them start working afterwards, and some of them are just completely broken. This is also what happens with the same app. So sometimes these upgrades can be really positive if they're executed effectively and add features that matter. But they can also be very detrimental if the process doesn't go smoothly, if it's tied to some other upgrades that don't work quite as well. So we see a few things that matter here. Well, so purchase drives access. Advertising can increase mobile app usage, but the upgrade impacts can vary. So that's a little bit about what impacts the likelihood of accessing the app. Now we can go through and say, well, what matters towards actual purchase? So this is the second stage here. Well, a few things just to drive validity. If you purchased before last week, you're more likely to purchase this week. We can look at some distance measures. If you live near the store, you're more likely to purchase in the actual store, but you're less likely to purchase online. So it seems to make a bit of sense. So let's start to look at the other things. All right, so access, we see, seems to matter quite a bit. If you access the app, it's going to make you much more likely to actually purchase in both the online store as well as the offline store. So this matters quite a bit because what are these apps doing? How are they engaging their customers? Clearly only a small percentage are making purchases through the app. There has to be some value to it somewhere, or at least the retailer will hope that there's some value to it somewhere. And this is part of how it comes through. And also we see that advertising important is actually does not have an impact on the actual purchases. So display and traditional advertising don't really have an impact directly on the purchase model. But what we do see is that it has an impact on access. So advertising has an impact on access. Access has an impact on purchase. So advertising is mediated by access. So for these particular customers, you see that all this impact of advertising is actually picked up in the intermediary through using this mobile application. So we could say, all right, well, how important are these mobile apps, or is access to these customers? And we just did a few quick sensitivity analyses here. Say, well, every time you access the app, how much more likely does that make you to actually purchase from one of these items, from one of these 2 channels? And these are customers that are Well, to be honest, they're pretty engaged. They download this app, they use it. To actually download the app means you're an engaged customer to begin with. It also means you're probably a little bit closer from a bases perspective to the millennial generation, as Jim was saying, as opposed to the boomer generation. So they're people that are going to buy a little bit more online. And what it also says is that, all right, this impact of mobile access actually has roughly about twice as much impact on the online channel as it does from the offline channel. So we can put this together, and there's a few takeaways that we can get from this. So first, we want to think about how this app actually engages our customers. We can say first, well, there's not really much of a delayed impact on sales. And we can see this through this decay. It decays pretty much immediately, so there's not really this long-term delayed impact. And we didn't run a full impulse response function here yet. It'll probably show something slightly different, but we'll see that for this type of analysis, not really a delayed impact. So there's not really a lot of engagement there. So let's keep going. Say, well, that one didn't look like it came through right. There are purchases that happen outside of the app category. So you purchase, so you see the app, but then you actually go to the store and you actually purchase from other categories in other channels, which provides a good method for seeing where there is some engagement. You also see that this app mediates the advertising impact on sales. So through the app, that's where the advertising impact really matters for these customers, not directly to the stores themselves. It comes through the app. And last, we seem to have a bit of a reinforcing spiral. So access seems to drive purchase, but at the same time, past purchase also drives access. So there is a bit of a recurrent situation where having this app definitely leads to a cycle of purchase for these particular consumers. So these are 4 different ways that we see how app access tends to drive engagement. So I think we have a few minutes left.
OK, thanks.
Thank you very much.